Peer review. And what is it? We heard the word used all over. Peer reviewed. Show me the papers. Show me the evidence. And how do we know it's evidence? But to peer review. This thing, peer review, the word peer is an equal, a person of equivalent experience in some given field, relatable to whatever the conversation is. So they're better able to speak more specifically to whatever the topics are than the general person. So that's a peer. A peer, to my mind, if you're in a squad and you're doing training, your peer is the guy next to you. He is the guy you have to trust. Absolutely. So that's one level of peer. You get to know that person, you know their instincts, you can second guess their moves because you understand what their goals are. So that dude next to you is a huge, important peer because he's going to keep you alive. So as a scientist, as an engineer, as a doctor, as any professional can attest to, these peer reviews occur often. Peer review could be something as simple as your employment quality. How good an employee are you with your other? You ask other peers that have to work with you, hey, how's he doing? How am I doing? What am I doing? Is this right or is this wrong? Specifically, am I using this microscope right? It's not am I right or wrong about my philosophy. So peers are important, and there are huge processes built up around that. So anybody familiar with software development methodologies had better know what CMM is. But you'll only run across these things in bigger software development organizations because it's costly to implement. It's business processes and checks and bounds that are extra overhead and can easily be cut, can easily be manipulated. So peer review processes, very detailed, structured things inside of organizations with very specific content. So if I was going to do a design basis review for a reactor, I'm going to have, probably in my program, I'm going to have hundreds of formal and informal peer reviews physically scheduled. And part of this is just to force people to talk to each other to make sure all the bases have been covered. Is the concrete the right concrete? Is the rebar the right rebar? Did the purchasing agent purchase the right rebar? Were the specifications followed? What is the risk if that rebar is not up to quality? Can we keep going knowing that some bad rebar was buried down the bottom? Engineering, you're going to pull this back out and decide whether to dig a whole project up, or if you can proceed if it has changed any of the base design criteria. So you go through these peer reviews, very formal processes. I have been all sides of this. I helped General Motors create one of the maturity models inside of CMM that's now an industry standard. I helped a few organizations get to CMM certifications and improve their CMM capabilities. Capability maturity model is a very detailed software design methodology that includes all of these review processes. It's the process that says how best to do software. And as the environments get more critical, the processes get more critical. So what's a peer review you can think of that failed lately? Let's go for Boeing. Now, Boeing's airplane had software in it that apparently was optional. So when you go through a true CMM process with an experienced program and project team, They know to keep these fail-safes in place. They know to keep the weights and the values of these fail-safes pertinent in front of the managers that have to make financial decisions. They don't have to listen, because remember, all we're doing is saying, hey, we've got a problem, this could be the cost. Can we live with that or not? Have we got Uncle Sam to cover all of our contingency costs, and we don't have to worry about this stuff? There's a good question for you, very valid within the structure of corporates' failure mode analysis, because they have to have the finances to back up what they say they're backing up. If they don't have to back up healthcare, they don't have to allow for it in their profit model. So there you go. There's peer review. This is the advanced introduction to processes within corporations that they brag about. These are self-healing processes. They go out and they contract a firm to run and manage these processes. The liabilities get spread out, the responsibilities get spread out, and you lose a lot of things. So to the Boeing aircraft, that piece of software was released. It was poorly released. I'm sure that because it's option content software, that there are charges for it, and there's required training for it. And yet all of those little pieces and procedures broke down within the Boeing software organization, a very discrete business inside of the Boeing huge infrastructure. Remember, global corporation. This isn't Seattle I'm talking about, but it is Seattle. So those processes failed. Process failures. Let's go back to another one. The Anaconda oil spill was directly caused by the blowout preventer failing. That is the root cause. The blowout preventer did not and could not do its job for whatever reason. If it was there and functioning properly, would it have done its job? So that blowout preventer is the single most important piece of equipment on especially an offshore rig, because you can't get to the seafloor bed easily to do anything about it. Even above ground well losses, when that blowout preventer fails, when the process around that whole drill pipe a mile down in the ground has got to be done correctly for that blowout preventer not to fail. Casing, drill pipes, string weight, blah, blah. So that was a process. Somewhere within that corporation's processes, they had massive failures. They had overlooks of things brought to them that they ignored, and you can almost bet these are cost-benefit analyses. Can we take the risk of doing business this way for another 3 weeks, drilling like a motherfucker and not paying enough attention, and get away with it? That is kind of the question. You can see that this is our IQ 45. Can we get away with it? This is the first questions, the way the questions are posed in that goddamn boardroom. So, sorry, I'm out of process here. Peer reviews. So at every point in a process, when I was sitting on the firing range with some pretty cool weapons, there was a peer standing right by me. In boot camp, he was standing right on top of you. He would step on your back so fast and probably break it if you did something wrong, because that's what a good peer does. So yeah, this little peer thing, it's huge. It's your neighbor. He's a peer on some level for something, you know. He's got an opinion on how you keep your lawn. He keeps his lawn some way, so yeah, he's going to try and judge you maybe for the weeds or the dandelions, but I don't use weed killer. I do pull them. So peer review processes as part of engineering processes. I said CMM, those are capital letters. Capability Maturity Model is one of the major software development methodologies out there. And inside of that are things like Scrum and other, quick development methodologies that are cool. For healthcare software, which I worked on, your Medicare and Medicaid software systems. Those processes were reasonable. I can't really fault where we tried to use our peer review processes for software releases in doing failure mode analysis of why we did fail. We put a bad piece of software out there. Typically, it was management pressures more than the software development team's pressures. So big systems, very large, very interconnected processes that matter. Each layer of it is looked at by peers. This is how engineering is done, no matter what the engineer. This is how science is done. This is how politics is done. These review processes are important, and the openness and availability of the review processes. So if internally I issued a major risk for a project or program, I've got a safety risk on a robot. We've got to have all of the firmware for all of this series of robots that we have deployed in 27 plants in 3 continents, and it is going to take an hour of time per robot to do the software upgrades in conjunction with some other tied system software that has to be done. And you planned this for a long time, and everybody looked at the plans and agreed on the risks, because if you don't start up a week from now at a, say, $4 or $5 million a day production plant, when the stockholders were expecting it to turn on, there's a lot of disappointment in a lot of directions. So you have a vested interest in doing things right. This is the detail, the rigor that you do inside of these projects. So a failure I mentioned, blowout preventer. That was a mechanical design failure and a maintenance failure, because that blowout preventer had problems. They knew about it, and they sat down in a meeting and decided, we got this, and they didn't. Whoever said we got this was apparently wrong, and maybe we learned from that. But if you follow up, these blowout preventers are a problem. The Department of Energy and whoever else is out there playing these games has whitewashed those deep water blowout preventers and the problems. The industry doesn't have to report to you, because they're paying their own people to watch their own people to watch themselves, so they don't get caught. And that is contract management 701. You hire your peers, right? You know what those peers are capable of doing very well, so you put them in places of power. So peer structures are hugely important. We see them everywhere. We call it faith, we call it conspiracy, we call it a whole lot of things, and yet there's a structured process we can talk directly to around how we understand what went wrong. The failure mode analysis. Each one of these little pokes is a career for anybody that wants to get into it, and there's no easy entry doors here. All I can tell you is rattle the handles. Don't just, hey, anyone home? So, yeah. And appearance is everything, really. Without having the proper tie, you're nothing, according to your peers, right? So these process things run rampant everywhere. We are process-driven people. We like consistency. We like to get up in the morning and see the sun came up with us, and that the cup of coffee is going to be ready in a few minutes. We're creatures of habits, and we enjoy and will protect those habits. But peers can advise us that some of those habits might not be healthy. So the peer thing is important. Letting your peers know you appreciate their efforts is important. And yet, life goes on. With all the poor decisions we make, we still manage to make it better. So, what is the point? bonus points here. You know, the style guide for presentation of YouTube videos is pretty impressive. I do recommend that you pay attention to all their rules, and you know, green screen elements like behind me to throw people off and to cause confusion are really not worth talking about.